All right, Baltimore native Emma Childs graduated from Maryland Institute College of Art with a BFA in General Fine Arts. In this current body of work, Emma has been developing a language of painting that allows her to explore the way we exist in the world we build. Emma's work explores moments of chaos and mundanity, freedom and containment, isolation and contact. She's interested in the ability of her work to evoke a powerful emotional response from the viewer, as well as creating objects that physically interact with their environment, while straddling the line between creating something self-contained as well as reaching outward. You can read more about Emma on our website, Creative Mornings Baltimore. Please help me welcome Emma Childs to the stage.
Hi, thank you for coming. When I thought about this month's theme of simplicity, the first thing that came to my mind was my dad's favorite quote, which I remember him telling me when I was in high school. That quote is by German playwright and thinker Goethe, and he says, "Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it." The quote has transformed into a simplified mantra, "Begin it," in my almost everyday internal dialogue. It can be applied to almost anything that even feels slightly intimidating on any given day. That can be getting out of bed, paying taxes, saying yes to a new experience, speaking at Creative Mornings, starting a new painting, or finishing one that I've been avoiding. Those are a few examples of times when I would tell myself to simply begin it. The more I think about it, the simplicity of this concept on how to approach the world has greatly defined how I've grown as an adult. I'm someone with extremely high expectations of what I will create and build for myself, but that can feel extremely loud, overwhelming, and exhausting. I'm someone who throws myself into my work. I think, especially as a creative who works for themselves, getting comfortable with boldness has been crucial. When things feel daunting, I've learned to simply fall back on begin it and try to let everything else fall into place. As a full-time artist, creating work and simultaneously running a business to support and build a life for myself, I think this concept and approach to the world is certainly relevant to my painting. This language of painting developed when I was at MICA, working on my senior thesis. I was creating visual metaphors for human experiences in relation to one another. I was asking questions like, does this shape feel like it's holding this one up? Or does the top shape feel like it's pushing the other down? And how do these dynamics shift if I change the color relationship? I figured out what I was trying to do was digest my own experience by paring things down to a simplified language of shape and color. I was finding a groove and a kind of comfort in creating these simple objects and images. Something in my brain craves the harmonious end result after layers and layers of painted color fields. If you see my work in person, you'll notice that beneath the final image on the canvas, there are many layers and decisions made throughout the process. The process of making a painting for me is more complicated than what shows in the final result. And I think that's a metaphor for a lot of things in our experience as human beings. And I'm still asking questions like this during my process today, but the work has definitely grown organically and evolved since then, because so have I. And I think that my dad's wisdom in teaching me to approach life with simple boldness is to thank for that. I think what a lot of people like about my work is the visual simplicity of it at first glance. I would say that my work is approachable and palatable, even if you're not too familiar with abstract art. It's mostly made up of flat fields of color, and I've always said that to those that ask, it's okay if you don't want to understand it. It's okay with me if you simply like the way it looks. If you choose to bring my work into your space, even if it's simply because you like it visually, that's still a way of beginning it. Some viewers immediately dive in on their own personal level. I like to eavesdrop on people walking through exhibitions and see what they say. I've heard viewers say things like, "This reminds me of my mother and I for some weird reason." I love hearing these responses because whether or not the viewer is aware, they're opening a door and allowing my work into their life and giving it meaning of their own, and making the work bigger than me. Other viewers want to completely dive in and ask me all about what I'm thinking of when I make something. And I think that's also a meaningful connection with the work. And a lot of the time I'm working out color choices and compositional details and playing with the materiality of paint itself and not worrying about all the conceptual relevance until the painting makes sense to me. And then I have that moment of, oh, that's what I was working out there. It's pretty therapeutic at times. I feel like the question of what does it mean creates intimidation around viewing abstract art. Like people feel as if they aren't looking at it correctly if they don't immediately get it. I love when people want to understand me and my thought process as an artist. But I think when you don't have the chance to know the artist behind the work and ask questions, it can become overwhelming and loud when trying to feel like you're grasping an abstract work. I think this can apply to our experience of the world itself. It can be a lot to grasp sometimes. So to me, simplicity is something that makes our complicated world and selves digestible. It can serve as both a break from what's overwhelming and also a door to deeper understanding. Paring things down sometimes helps to eventually come to grasp the whole picture and conquer things that might at first seem completely out of reach or beyond imagination. I've been finding that when I let myself move intuitively and embrace simplicity, things unfold and the world answers better than anything I could have come up with. I wanted to leave a lot of time for Q&A and keep my talk simple.
Yeah, we like simple. Does anyone have any questions off the bat? You gotta raise your hand real high. There you go.
What kind of paint do you use?
I use acrylic paint.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, acrylic on canvas.
I was wondering that too.
There should be a few photos. Yeah, we gotta get it out.
Anybody else?
Kate.
Hey, there we go. Hey.
Hi.
You can shout too, because I can't see you.
So first, thank you for being here with us this morning.
Thanks for coming.
Of course. And you have a bunch of artists in the space in the front row. These are all Baltimore School for the Arts
That's amazing.
sophomores.
Thanks for coming.
So in the spirit of keeping it simple,
Yes.
can you give them maybe something that you would have wanted to say to yourself when you were in high school thinking about the next phase before you entered MICA? Can you talk about something like a little nugget, a little gem you
Yeah.
can drop?
Yeah.
Drop a gem on them this morning.
I'll try.
Drop a gem.
No pressure.
No, no pressure is a gem in itself. I didn't even think about art school I went to a high school, and kind of Baltimore area high school, but it wasn't a specialized art school. They had a great art program, which helped kind of open my eyes to going to art school. And I think just keep making what you love to make, and the world will respond accordingly. But don't put too much pressure on yourself, because you've got a lot of time.
All right, I see you over here.
What's challenging you right now?
I think what's challenging me right now is I always kind of have an underlying pressure on myself to make something completely new and push my work. And it's kind of a challenge to let myself kind of let that just happen instead of forcing things.
Coming over.
Hey, Emma.
Hi.
You talked a lot about different shapes holding each other up or down, and also the color relationships between them changing what you want the piece to say. How do you feel about scale? Like, how does the scale of a painting change? Where you're headed with it? Does that surprise you? Do you have a plan? What's your scale?
I love to work big, but I also like to see my work living in many different spaces, so I want to accommodate to that too. So that's why I work in a wide variety of scales of work, but my preference is to work big because there's a presence about it, and there's a kind of, when you're standing next to a painting that's bigger than you, it feels different. So that's my preference, but I do like to see my work in all different spaces, so I make small work too.
Hey, coming up to you.
What inspires your work?
I would say my life inspires my work, but more specifically, things that I observe in relations of human beings. So the best way to describe my work is it's an abstract image of a feeling that I'm trying to create. And I also just appreciate the materiality of paint itself, but I love that it can take on this whole new meaning. So, for example, the work behind me is a little bit different than work that I was making a couple years ago. My work was very hard edge and kind of really contained in itself, and I've kind of been playing with the materiality of paint more and movement. Yeah, that's more kind of like my regular work. But my work is about kind of energies between human beings or within yourself. So these shapes, you can say, the one that was before, I wanted it to kind of look like one was breaking off of the other one and could be floating up. It could also be weighted down. And the way that abstraction can kind of play with your eye and the white area can look like negative space kind of adds to that. So that's just kind of what I love about painting, is it can kind of be anything. But yeah, that's what my work is about, kind of.
I have a quick question. So this older work that you were just describing, to me, is super sculptural.
Uh-huh.
And not just for the obvious reasons of the different shaped canvas, but how did you come to work that way? And I mean, the way you apply paint too is very sculptural to me. It's a very like visceral feeling, even though it's not as, free as these later pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I still make work that looks like that. What I love about shaped canvas is the sculptural quality of it, and it kind of takes the painting from being an image on a traditional rectangle. When it's on a traditional rectangle, it's sometimes hard to think of it in the space that it's existing in, like it's kind of its own scene. Does that make sense? And when it's when you're thinking of it as an object and it's leaving a different shape on the wall behind it because it's got curves and cutouts and things like that, you're just thinking of the piece not so much as an image as it is an object. And I like that about the potential of painting, because it's both, like it's an image and it's an object in space.
Hello. I was asked this question recently and it gave me a lot of joy to answer, so I'm going to ask you, what is, if you could create like your ideal creative environment, you're about to paint something and you get total control over the environment in which you're about to paint, time of day, lighting, etc. What would your ideal creative environment be?
Man, that's a good question. Lighting, bright natural light, like that sunny day we had maybe 2 days ago. Right now in my studio, I just got a new studio, so that's my ideal creative environment right now. Yeah, I mean, I like to have a lot of space, like physical space, because I like to make large things. So if I feel like I can really spread out, that's definitely an ideal creative environment. Definitely always something in my ears, either music or podcasts. Yeah.
Hello, back here. Are any of your paintings ever finished? Do you feel like they're finished, or like do you find a stopping point, or do you have to just like move on to something else?
It just kind of comes to a point where I look at it and it kind of looks back. Like some of them take longer to kind of figure out that they're finished than others. And sometimes I'm working on a deadline, so I need to make it finished. But when I get to take my time, and I've sat with a painting for over a year before it's finished, because I like when the ideas come to me and it feels obvious and I'm not forcing anything. That's my favorite way to work. And I don't know, it just is a feeling that it's finished, but I mean, technically nothing, because you could add anything to anything. But yeah, I think it's just a feeling that I get.
Here. Oh. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. I wanted to ask you about the titles. I know some of them are untitled and some have a title.
Mm-hmm.
Do you title them before you work or after? Or what's the process for your titles?
So I kind of touched on that a little bit in my talk, not on titles, but on a lot of times when I'm working, I'm kind of just focusing on the materiality of paint, and I'm not getting myself too caught up in the conceptual side of things, because a lot of times it just becomes obvious after. I have a note in my phone that's about 5 years old now that I just write down either like thoughts that pop into my head that I think are interesting or that I want to remember, or things I overhear people say, or even things I see, like it'll be like, there's one line in it, it's like at the top, so I see it all the time, and it's like gray sidewalk square, and I don't know what it means anymore, but like it's just kind of like a running list, and a lot of times I get my titles from that note if it doesn't just come to me from looking at the piece. But a lot of times I'll have like old like title ideas, and then I'll make the painting that makes sense for it later without knowing it.
Hey, coming up.
Sorry to ask again, but I was curious about like if when you're working, is it like you are is the work like creating itself, or are you going into it with an idea? I also had this is a second question. I also had is there like a certain thing that you're trying to evoke in your viewers? Like, I know sometimes with my work, I try and I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but I try and like connect people to help people feel less alone. And I was just wondering if there's like a certain kind of specific kind of connection you want people to have to your work.
It's a really good question, and there's a lot of parts to it, so I'm going to try and remember. I feel like a lot of times it's me dancing with the work, because a lot of times the work feels like I'll look at it and it doesn't even feel like something I've made kind of thing. Like, obviously I made it, but that's when it kind of starts to feel bigger than me. Like, I don't even know how I came up with that idea sort of thing. And that's kind of because I'm working really intuitively. So I'll start, like, there'll be a color I really want to work with. And so I'll start with a field of that, and then I respond to that. So it kind of grows on itself. And that's kind of how the paintings get so layered and how the image kind of comes together. But I don't have a plan beforehand. I don't do sketching beforehand, just because I don't find that it translates for my work, really. Like, I can if I'm doing like a commission or something where they need like a rough plan. But I don't generally sketch ever or plan anything, because once I have the surface that I've built in person, like the shaped canvas especially, it feels different than it would on paper. So I would say I kind of dance with the work myself, like me and the work, but it's definitely a lot of intuition in it. And then your second question, what to evoke? I want to evoke from a viewer, I love when we can come to a kind of a universal agreement, because I'm making the work about my experiences, or they mean to me something about my experiences, and I love when people can see that and they feel something similar or the same thing, or even something completely different than what I'm thinking about, because then it means something to them. And that just, I think, adds to the beauty of the work itself. Yeah.
Over here.
Hello.
Hi.
So in your talk, you talked a lot about just starting, and the quote from your dad was about just starting. And so my question to you is, when you're looking to create a piece, what is that start point for you? Is it building the canvas? Is it throwing color, down on the canvas? What is that, okay, I just have to start? What is that kind of launching off point for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the building the canvas kind of comes, it doesn't feel as much pressure to me. So building the canvas doesn't feel like that, okay, start it. That part feels like the first shape that I lay down. And it usually is like in that first, a lot of my work has this like U shape at the bottom anchoring the entire composition, and that's usually where I'm starting. But yeah, it's that first like field of color. And then the next day, the next first field of color that I'm adding to it.
Do we have any other questions? Ooh, there we go.
Why do you think it's a U shape that's the start? What is it about the U?
It's something about it, like my shaped canvases are all kind of a similar shape. They're like not quite square. They're kind of like, they're always pretty much vertical orientation. And there's just something about it. I don't know. It just does something to my brain, and I like it. It just feels like it's anchoring the whole thing, and I can work off of it. And sometimes the U shape goes away eventually in the piece, but I'm pretty much always starting with that, and I just always have. Yeah. I like it, okay? No, because sometimes I don't. More recently, I don't. It comes and goes.
All right, anybody else? I have another question if you don't. Ooh, here's one. No, I get it.
How did you come to like doing abstract art in particular?
I really started doing abstract art during my time at MICA. I took a lot of painting classes and I took a lot of abstraction classes and like history of abstraction and all that kind of stuff. And I just really loved how artists work abstractly and how it leaves so much opportunity to use a material and to really like, because something I'd been asking myself like since high school that kind of felt like a pressure was, what do I even want to say? Like I like making art, but I don't really know what I want to say with it. And it just kind of made sense to me. Someone over here.
Where are we at? All right, coming over to you.
Have you ever had a reaction like to one of your pieces that's like made you see it differently or like feel like the meaning might be different than what you originally intended it to be?
Yes, I know I have. I can't fully think of an example. I've also had people not like my work, which is fine. But I can't think of an exact example. But I've had people say like, "Oh, this reminds me of something personal in their life that was just completely not even close to maybe what I was thinking about it." But that's what I think is interesting about it, because we all have different kind of memories of colors and memories of, like, we just have different experiences. So I think that it's cool to be able to make work that you can apply your own experience to.
Hello again.
Hi.
Since we have a lot of young artists in the room today, I think this is something super important that we all talk about as artists. It's really vulnerable to be an artist. So what is something that you do for self-care and to take care of your artist heart?
That's a good question. I try to surround myself with people that make me feel good. I think that's a good form of self-care. And yeah, just do things that I enjoy. Yeah.
Back again.
Hi.
Like it seems like what you're describing with your art is like it just comes from you and you later figure out what it means. Have you ever painted something that scared you? Like you were looking at it later and you said like, this is like quite terrifying that this is something I'm feeling.
I've made things that make me sad, like, oh. Yeah, not scared me, but yeah, I've made myself sad before.
You said in your speech that you don't care if people just like the way your work looks. So do you approach your work more aesthetically or as a more like personal, emotional endeavor?
Yeah, no, I don't approach it just aesthetically. What I meant by that was I like that it's approachable in that way, where people can just appreciate how it looks and not necessarily need to know what it means, even if they're curious. Like I meant it as more of it's a stepping off point for people, because the work is pretty simple at first glance, and you can just appreciate color to begin to appreciate it.
How do you feel like your art impacts you as a person? Like, do you feel like it, after you create a work and you kind of realize what it means to you, do you feel like that influences like how you feel about yourself and if you like learn stuff about yourself through the process?
Yeah, I think it probably makes me self-reflect a lot more than I probably would be. But I'm also kind of good at compartmentalizing those things and not letting it be an overwhelming thing, but more of just like a kind of nice learning about myself thing and being patient with myself. But that can be exhausting.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I think just being around creatives sometimes, and obviously you're an entrepreneur as well, how do you stay disciplined to make sure you're actually creating and making a living for yourself?
Well, I have to make myself just go every day. And I mean, the other side of that coin, I think, is sometimes creatives are working when they don't even feel like they're working. So it's kind of taking inventory of what I'm actually accomplishing. Like, I don't feel like I've done anything yet today, like that kind of thing. But in reality, I've been up and this is technically working for me. And sort of giving yourself grace in that way and like giving yourself credit. But I mean, I go to the studio pretty much every day. And if I'm not at the studio, it's because I'm doing something work related. But yeah, I think staying disciplined and just being in a routine and I mean, just making myself do it. Yeah.
This is related to the question about like artist self-care and stuff, but and I know this is like a big issue like for pretty much all artists, but like how do you deal with things like burnout and like just loss of motivation?
Yeah. I think that it's okay to not feel like you can make something once in a while, you know? Like I'm not making something every single day. If you plan ahead, and I mean this could be a really long answer, because I mean if you're making your living off of this, you can't just stop working, right? But there's other things that you can be doing, like putting your work out there, working on getting your work out there, or just taking a break and thinking about like what your work could look like eventually. And I think that the more pressure you put on yourself, the harder it would be to get out of a burnout. And I think just to let yourself even take like a day, it's not gonna hurt anybody, you know?
Are there any colors that you use often that you find that like you use to convey a certain emotion a lot?
I think it depends on what other colors are involved in the work. The color just kind of feels like a tool and every color kind of has the potential to be anything else depending on what it's next to. So like a really, really dark purple could look black in one painting if it's next to like a super light color next to it, or if it's next to a true black, it'll look purple. And so I like how the color can change in that way. But yeah, there's definitely, if you look at my work, I definitely have phases, especially of favorite colors. Like there was a year where I was using like just all dark blues, purples, almost blacks. And then I get kind of tired of looking at it, and then I kind of am interested in something else. But yeah, I go through phases.
I'm back here. Thanks for being here today. I love your paintings. I have a question about the balance between being a painter and being an entrepreneur. I feel like a lot of times for creatives, specifically musicians and artists, mixing the business side of it, in the past has been, kind of a faux pas in a sense. I'm curious how you balance those two, and if you worry at all about one influencing the other side of it too much.
Well, I got really good advice one day, and she's in the room right now. I was Katie Pumphrey's intern when I was still at MICA, and she told me that the way she thinks about it, and I think it's a really brilliant way of explaining it, is like driving two cars. So you have the painting car, and Katie, correct me if I'm butchering this, the painting car and the business car, and you want them to be driving in tandem, but you never want one to go into the other's lane. And that has kind of, that visual helps me, like, okay, right now I'm driving the painting car, business car's over there, and then I go home and I have to do some emails or whatever, something else, admin. I'm getting in the business car and the painting car is over here. So just kind of keeping them mentally separate, like I'm not thinking about business while I'm painting. Like I think one of the worst things is like, what would make this painting sell? Like how can I make this to make someone like want to buy it? I think is maybe what you're getting at. And I think it's important to definitely keep those two things separate. Did I explain that well, Katie? Perfect.
I had a question. So you said earlier something along the lines of you find inspiration in human connection or interaction. Do you ever have moments that you think, oh, I want to explore this in my work? Like, what does that look like for you? Do you kind of tuck that away for later when you're in front of a canvas?
Yeah, that's like moments I'll just write down in my note, like, that was like weird. I definitely want to think about that more kind of thing. Or like, wow, that was really great and I would love to like be able to capture that. Yeah, that's when it goes in the note, but I don't say it out loud or anything. It's tucked away. It's like a undercover journalism.
Did anybody else have any questions? Raise your hand up real high if you do. I got you. I'm coming.
Are there any techniques that you kind of find yourself going to when you're painting, or do you kind of like to do a little bit of everything?
Yeah, a lot of my work is big, flat fields of color. So my technique is I'm always working horizontally, so the painting will be on sawhorses or on a table. And I'm laying in the color kind of in a grid, like in layers. So if I want a blue shape, it'll be, I'm also taping. I use a lot of tape, and I seal the tape. And then I lay in the color like in a grid pattern, so it's super, super flat. And then I also like to play with finishes, so some of the color planes will be matte, some of them will be shiny. But I also kind of play around with pouring paint too, and kind of merging those two, because they're kind of opposite techniques, and I kind of am loving that about it. But those are kind of the two main techniques that I use.
So as an artist and an entrepreneur, there's a lot of invisible labor that we are doing all the time. And you talked about that, because you're working right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some things that you have as boundaries around you? What does your community look like? Who's pouring into you? And who are you pouring into to make sure that you stay whole? Talking back to the point about self-care.
Yeah.
Like, you are a full being, but you're driving 2 cars at the same time. So what are the boundaries? What does your community look like? How are you being poured into?
Yes. Well, I have great examples of parents. It's been really helpful. They both work for themselves, so they have really, really great advice for me when it starts to feel really overwhelming, and I'm really grateful and lucky for that. But I also just have a great group of people in general around me that support my work and kind of know that I'm always working, or that I shouldn't be always working. And I think it's important to actually take days off. Like, I really do take my weekends off, and I don't think about it, and I don't go to the studio unless it sounds like something really fun that I really, really want to do. I think it's okay to just take an entire day or 2 off. Yeah, and I do that on purpose.
I'm back again. My name's Cooper, by the way. Yeah. Anyways.
Thanks for coming, Cooper, and I love your questions.
Oh yeah, thank you for being here as well. I was wondering if there are physical things that inspire you. So I think you mentioned the sidewalk square. Are there any particular things that draw you in, especially?
Yeah.
I know for me, I really am very drawn to fish and the anatomy of the fish.
Uh-huh,
So I was wondering if there are any physical things that you find particularly intriguing.
Yeah. I love architecture, and I love furniture, and I love kind of all kinds of design. I love fashion. I love kind of all aspects of design, because it's a way of curating your entire life, how you dress, where you live, how you decorate your space. That is really inspiring to me. And also found color in surroundings is inspiring to me. So that sidewalk square, I think it was spray painted lavender or something, and there was a cool gray next to it, and finding color combinations out in the world like that is inspiring to me. But yeah.
All right, I think we have a little bit of time for 1 or 2 more.
Hi. You so wisely said that being an artist is driving 2 cars at once. So what are your goals for your 2 cars? What are your big, giant, out there goals in the future for your work? And what are your big, giant goals for you as a self-employed whole person that has to live your life, pay your bills, do all the things? What are those big goals? And I have a second part to this 2-part question. How can we help you get there? Right?
Well, thanks, Katie. My goals, I guess, entrepreneur and whole person wise, is to be able to financially provide myself a life that, when I look back at my young self, that I would love to give her. That's kind of how I think about that. And then career goals, it would be cool to be in a museum or something. But I also like to just say, I want it to be something that I couldn't imagine or come up with right now. That's what I like to say my goals are. And how you can help is by buying paintings.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I want to hear. Thank you, Emma. Yeah. Can you tell us where can we purchase work? Where are you going to be next?
You can follow me on Instagram. That's kind of where I update everything. It's EMME Childs, CHILDS. A lot of people used to call me Emmy. So it's Emmy Childs. And then my website is emmachildsart.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Emma.